Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. You're going to be watching the Left of Greg episode number 27, the video version of our podcast where we discuss boundaries. Specifically, what we're talking about is what we say is people teach you how they want to be treated. So I hope you guys enjoy the podcast. If you want any more information, please check out the links down below, are going to be right in the description of the video. You can always follow us on Facebook at HBPRNA, and please like the videos, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends if you're really interested. So hope you guys enjoy the show. Thanks. All right, man. So we'll go ahead and get started. So today we are going to be discussing boundaries, right? So what we mean by boundaries, about how people learn their boundaries, how they test them, how they push them, how that works, normal human behavior, and everyone understands what we mean by normal, meaning, within normal, social setting for what's considered, in a clinical sense of
Precisely.
of normal, not, hey, I don't like that clothing or something, just or
The
your
bubble is
hairstyle.
equal rather
Yeah.
than having something to do with a
Right.
person's intent.
So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and specifically just trying to keep that boundaries. It's going to go into a number of different spirals where we'll get back, but I think we'll start with it on there. And today we'll introduce a couple more Remo-isms or Gregisms, right? So things that you've said that I've always taken with me, I've always remembered that become very, almost like any other sayings, can become cliche, but there's a lot of meaning. There's so much meaning behind these that it's very simple. Like the one we use, obviously the slogan for our company, training changes behavior. Well,
Right.
that's so, simple, it's elegant. Well, of course, I was explaining to those folks who I talked to the other day, that major corporation, looking at some of the issues they were having, and they were trying to change some of the culture and change some of the issues that they had going on. And they were simply educating their employees, and they're realizing, look, we're doing all this and nothing's happening. And I had to
Right.
explain them, well, there's a difference between training and education. And we did a whole podcast on that. I think that was our first one. So if you guys are listening, you can always go down on that. But one of the things, and I think it'd be good to segue into boundaries and what we're talking about, is one of the Remo-isms that you always say is people teach you how they want to be treated, and you teach everyone how you want to be treated, and they teach you how they want to be treated. Well, it seems simple, right? Like, people teach you how they want to be treated. What does that mean for folks that are listening, Greg? How would you explain that?
Well, let's go back just a couple of pages in the book, Brian, if it's okay. And
It's
talk
usually
about where
it's
this stuff
usually
comes
what you do when I ask you a direct question.
exactly, because that gives my old ass time to think. No, but the idea of the four corners of the document here are, it's all about where you grew up and your individuality that came from the tribes, the groups, the setting that built you. So I learned early in our house, because we were a very violent family. I'm not saying that we espoused those, but I said that we certainly lived in a rough neighborhood, in a rough part of town, and we were a rough family. So if you wanted food, you had to be fast. I know you know this from your Irish upbringing. And you had brothers, and they were bigger than you, so and a sister. So you had to be fast.
Yeah,
on
the problem is that my brother is bigger than me, and he's 8 years younger than me.
Yeah, but he's also a Navy SEAL, so he knows some of the sneaky techniques, right? So the idea, though, Brian, is that I learned to be the king of the sound bites. So whether I was on the street talking to friends, or whether I had to talk to my parents, I learned to try to limit what you were saying to these memorable, sticky ideas, and then you could retain them. And so that came from my old man, a former Marine, and God rest
Marine
his
Raider,
soul,
Marine Raider
battalion.
Yeah.
And honest to God, the meanest human being ever. Who Jeff Williams, my brother, and I were grieving over the death of a very good friend of ours, Ronnie Razwan, another guy, Ron, God rest his soul, getting all choked up just thinking about it, who died from a horrific gunshot accident when we were younger. And my dad walked in and said, okay, I'll give you 15 minutes to cry. Then when you're done crying, we got to get back to work, because tears are a waste of water. And I was like, oh, you
Wow.
soulless
Oh,
bastard.
wow.
You know what I'm saying?
You're
And he did it at the end of his fist. So, you learn from those things. So what I said is, okay, how about we do those in a positive manner rather than scaring the
Yeah.
hell out of everybody? But he's also the one that taught me early on, those who know. So what happened is we had a wall at the dojo that we used to write up these life truths on. And then anytime a Gregism came up that everybody liked, it would be let your behavior, not your words, speak for you. And we had that as show me or bite me, let's call it. Pain is weakness leaving the body. Like you just said, people teach you how they want to be treated. And these are all from the mindset of living and navigating the streets of Detroit or any big city back, like I said, in the days of the dojo. Hey, how do you determine ML, MD, COA? Why did the person cross the street? Is this car slowing down to ask directions or is it going to be early signs of a drive-by? Most people want their say, not their way. So you're not going to have to go kinetic in many instances, very few. And finally, something again that we have on the website right up with training changes behaviors is that your safety is largely your responsibility. And
Right.
the blood and sweat and tears that came from this, you got to remember, like back in the day, I'm nobody now, but back in the day, I fought guys like Steve Nasty Anderson, Greg DeLone, Mike and A was our edge weapon and impact weapons instructor. John Peters, Danny Inosanto, Dino Kane. I mean, I could go down the litany of guys. I actually got to spar Bill Wallace back in the day. So a lot of what I got is from standing up to my old man and talking crap back to him, getting knocked on my ear, and then learning. And so what I'd like to do is say that the theme for today is the boundaries that I learned way back then. And when I was a kid, I wrote this down. First, I learned my boundaries. Then I test my boundaries. And finally, I push my boundaries. And that came from the School of Hard Knocks. How do people learn? And when people talk about that, I came from the streets, or, I was, Harvard educated or whatever else, I'd always watch TV or I'd read a book or I'd talk to somebody and get beat down by my dad for it. But that's how the process goes. First, I learn my boundaries. Now, I can learn those on my own. I can learn those from my team. I can learn those by getting punched in the mouth by Danny Munz when I was younger because he stole one of my G.I. Joes. But then testing the boundaries, meaning, you're literally trying to see, okay, where does this force field end? When does the net go away from under my feet? When am I out there on my own? And then I push my boundaries. And what I wanted to talk about today, and why I'm glad you brought this up, is that those can be two different sides of the same coin. They
Right.
can be used for good or they can be used for evil. So
Right.
in there is your answer.
Yeah.
Should you choose to go back and edit through that, in there is your answer.
Well, okay. Well, I appreciate that.
You're welcome. By the way.
But to go back, I think we'll start it to where exactly you said, first I learn my boundaries, then I
Right.
test my boundaries, then I might push my boundaries. And now that's, first of all, that's normal human development. That's you as a kid, right?
Absolutely.
So I remember
Absolutely.
as a kid, same thing. We all sat there, and when my mom was like, hey, Brian
just
John
taught you.
Marin, get your butt. Once I knew she used my
She
full
just
name.
taught you. Exactly.
That she taught me because I knew what was coming after that. Then there was going to be consequences. And so that's normal, is we all have to learn our boundaries
Right.
growing
But
up.
what you just said is the most amazing life truth in the world, and it bears repeating. Okay. Your mom taught you left-handedly, she didn't write it on a dry erase board.
Yeah.
And with my dad, with both hands, and Uncle Paul. But the idea was that she taught you that, listen, you taught her too, that you weren't coming at the first one, but she taught you that when she said your full name, the next thing was going to be a SWAT or,
Yep.
Whatever. Okay. So why is that important? That's hugely important because you said the second part of that is that you have to have consequences. If there are no consequences for your actions, there's no structure. Talk about building structure. With the gosh damn Great Barrier Reef wouldn't be around if all those little dead crustaceans and things didn't come together to create that. Well, it's more than a formula. It's a way of life. If you don't have structure, you're going to turn out to be a crappy person, a damaged human. If you don't have boundaries and you feel free to navigate in and out of those boundaries without consequence, you're going to be a bad human. I truly believe that, Brian.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think you can. There's plenty of sociologists
Yep.
and scientists that would completely agree with that. But now you're looking at, it's, and that's why there's different, um, different policies out there. There's different, legislation that,
Yep.
especially when it comes to kids and young criminals, like, hang on, let's not throw them into a system and then commit them to that life. They don't, if they never were taught what those boundaries were, they never learned them, right? So you literally
Yep.
now can be a fully adult human being and not understand boundaries. And I think that goes right into kind of what, I mean, we're going to talk about both sides of the coin, but when it comes to criminal behavior, predatory behavior, all right, that's about those boundaries where they don't have that boundary, where
Yep.
most people, especially anyone listening to this right now, would go, well, I'm not going to do that. That's wrong. Or there's consequences for me doing that. They're less likely to do that. And now that's I think the good way to describe that, and maybe you could
Yeah.
disagree, I know, would be that's a continuum, right? So
Yep.
what I find acceptable is within my arm span here. But if I fall on that continuum way all the way outside already, well, I'm willing to accept behaviors that maybe you, Greg, aren't. And I think that's kind of where it comes down to what those boundaries are. And there's societal reasons, there's
Yep.
cultural norms, there's all kinds of things that go into what we are what we are willing to accept in terms of someone else's behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a duplicitous standard here, and it's necessary, meaning boundaries are for you
Mm-hmm.
and boundaries are for society. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Right.
Or culture, add all those other words. But I also want to take just a minute and make sure that our viewers and our listeners understand what it's not. For example, the normal human development of teenagers in a society is cataloged. You can look it up. There's so many scientific studies out there. But kids act up because they need you to cut the umbilical cord.
Yes.
And they need to fly. They need to go outside the nest. And that's absolutely essential. And so I've had so many parents come up to us, and you remember, Brian, we'll be on the road teaching, and you, Shelley, and I can't get the bathroom break because
right.
the people will come up and they'll be saying, hey, what's the number one question? Hey, where was this training all my life? Where was it before my last deployment? Okay. What's always the number two question? Is my spouse cheating on me?
Yep.
Am I lying?
Yeah.
And then the third question always comes up the same thing.
Yeah.
Why can't I control my blank age child?
Yeah.
And the reason is that's not about boundaries. That's about normal human emotional maturity, where the kid has to act up and act out. So you throw them out of the nest and they go and thrive. Because 3,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, depending on what you read and who you believe, that was an imperative. It was a social imperative. If you didn't do that, there was no furtherance of society. So when it comes to boundaries, though, see, as a kid, Brian, your mom was teaching you those boundaries not to be mean to you, but she had to allow you to understand that boundaries were about who you are. Boundaries were about how you are going to relate to other people the rest of your life. You ever have those people come up to you and go, hey, man, that guy got a divorce, or that female got a divorce, or whatever significant other situation you're in, and they went and married the same person the next time?
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
Why? Okay, homophily, of course, isopraxism. We know birds of a feather flock together, but it's more than that. It's that we tend not to enforce our boundaries in certain relationships, the people we love, right? Or our children. And that's where things can take a dramatic turn. If we don't have consequences for our boundaries, society, family, kids, schools start to break down. They start to erode, and then we're not living that legal, moral, and ethical lifestyle anymore.
Right, and you bring up legal, moral, and ethical. That's good, because it's kind of actually where this is where our laws come from, right? I mean, they come from different, development of civilizations over thousands and thousands of years of what becomes social norms. And then if it becomes strong enough, we say, all right, we need to pass a law to then make sure that this is written down and it's clear.
Code of Hammurabi.
Exactly. So that's all, from a, I guess, historical perspective, how it comes into this. But I guess to get to kind of some specifics. So we kind of talk about criminal and predatory behavior, and about, I guess, what you'd call boundary violators. So how do we deal with boundary violators? What does that look like, or what is that person going to do, and how do you deal with that?
Great question. And let's talk about the essence of HBPRNA. Human, behavior, pattern recognition, 1, and analysis, 2. So the idea is why, I would counter to your question, why do we need to identify those folks? In a relationship, no means no. In any type of situation with self-worth and self-esteem, self-worth and self-esteem are your best defense against the elements, against society, against, if we were going to talk about self-defense, Brian, the first thing is, physician, heal thyself. You have to be morally strong. And to do that, you have to create boundaries. Listen, I will not drink and drive. I will not, hit or molest in any manner my children or my significant other or a date. You write down, yellow pad it if you have to. These are the things I will do, and these are the things that I won't do. I will not engage in any conduct that is illegal, immoral, unethical, right? Those become those life rules. And what happens is the bad guy, remember the other side of that coin, the obverse, is that they didn't have that structure and they didn't have those boundaries laid out for them. They didn't understand that escalation. Therefore, you had two types of things that diverged in the woods. One, you had a person that went into a gang. And that, right now, if a gangbanger is listening while they're like on a treadmill or something like that, you know what I'm saying? The idea, it's not that unusual. We get weird calls.
We do get weird calls.
Is, listen, if you're a gangbanger, the thing that you were seeking out was structure, organization.
Yes.
And you wanted consequences you never got when you were a kid. So you see that gang structure as somebody yelling at you, and so you create a false self-worth,
right,
by saying I belong to a group. Now we both know that the U.S. Army, the Marine Corps, that's
those
a
are
form
gangs.
of a gang, yes. And so now what you had is you have a person that's got a tremendous amount of structure, that lives their life ethically and says, I want to go in here and be a part of this team or this team. Or you have another person that says, I didn't have very much structure and I got knocked around a lot, and I don't want to get knocked around anymore, so I'm going to surround myself with this gang. The idea is, first I learn my boundaries. I have to understand what those boundaries are, okay? Then I have to test them to see how strong the ice is. And then what happens is, every once in a while, I'm going to push those boundaries. Why? To learn that there are consequences. And that's the key step that malevolent people, bad people, bullies forgot about. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
What they did, Brian, is they pushed the envelope and they liked it. They liked seeing that person cower in fear. They liked hearing that person cry. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Or start negotiating. Look, would you change your ethics or your moral compass or your legal opinion because you're on vacation? I mean, do you believe in stuff where people say, oh, well, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, or, if you're in a different
it doesn't. I actually have proof of that. We with that that marriage didn't last that long, but it definitely came back from Vegas.
Okay. So it came, well, that's called an STD, Brian, and that will be with you all your life. Just remember that. Sorry, Michele. No, but seriously, Brian, let's take that. What you just said is that there were consequences from activities that occurred, right?
Right.
Did they surprise you?
Well, I mean,
no, you were surprised you got caught.
Yeah,
or somebody was surprised.
Any consequences? Yeah, you don't ever you those situations. They're not thinking of the consequences if you haven't been taught, right?
Okay, wait a minute. But there are consequences.
Oh yes,
see, that's what I'm trying to say.
Right,
I'm trying to say the turpitude exists, and that's where we get intent from, Brian. We get intent from a person that knowingly, arbitrarily, capriciously enters into a behavior that they know is wrong,
right,
legally, morally, and ethical, yet they think, well, I'm not going to get caught. See, if I went by a car and the window was down on a car and there was a briefcase that was sitting there and I could see a laptop and an iPad, never in a million years would I consider reaching it. As a matter of fact, if you're Shelley, our CEO, Shelley would post a sentry and walk around until she found the person, take their keys and roll up the window and admonish them for leaving the stuff. Shelley, she's got that fiber. She's got that character. So that's what we want to instill in our kids. But there has to be a handoff, Brian. There has to be a time when boundaries that you set with how people treat you, like John Wayne in The Shootist, great film. John Wayne says, I won't be talked down to. I won't be laid a hand upon, right? Those become imperatives for personal boundaries. With personal boundaries, I get personal growth. With personal boundaries, I gain self-worth and I gain self-esteem. Why do you think we
Right.
have those situations where people with low self-esteem end up becoming sexually abused because predators can smell, feel, and taste them, or a person feels like suicide's the only option. I am not understood. I have no self-worth, right?
So you brought up a couple great points I want to just kind of hit on, and one, your analogy of, hey, Marine Corps, Army, law enforcement, your night that you do poker night with the guys,
Yep.
all of whether it's or brunch with the girls for champagne brunch.
Yep.
That's the type of gang, right? So
Yes.
so obviously the difference between Marine Corps and Gangster Disciples are, Marine Corps is honor, courage, commitment. Gangster Disciples is murder, death, kill. So
Right,
their
right,
values
right.
are different.
But they have honor
Yeah,
amongst themselves. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it can be misplaced and
Right.
misunderstood because we're looking outside into that group rather than
Yes.
from the inside out. But you're right. You're spot on.
And the reason I bring that up too is because then it's okay. So the next time someone is looking at these situations or gangs or crowd behavior or different groups and how could they do this or what, hey, understand it through the lens of what you already know.
Precisely.
Gang activity, crowd, you've done that. And so you brought up another one too. I'd like to hit on it briefly, is when you said, hey, I walk past and I see a suitcase and laptop and an open window, all that stuff. No, I'm not going to take that because that's wrong. I know that's wrong. One, I wouldn't want that to ever happen to me, but there's and it's illegal, immoral, and unethical. But that's a great point, because then there's a lot of issues where, crowd behavior takes over and there's this different mentality. And there is research to show that, okay, you may act differently in those situations. I know you did the lessons learned on one. You guys can check out the website about, the observer or bystander effect, all that kind of stuff. But there's also a lot of people and researchers who will say, I don't really know if that meets it, because maybe these people have just never been in that situation before where they could get away with something and didn't get caught. Meaning
I get what
it's the individual, not necessarily.
So you're saying the
group.
trial by fire occurs when that person sees that.
Yes.
And maybe you can tell about their temperament, or maybe they'll learn from that situation. My thing is, if you're that long into learning and your emotional maturity that you don't understand good and evil, right and wrong, then we've had a collapse somewhere. And that collapse has led to you being a street urchin that's coming out with a gun or doing something stupid. Mm-hmm. Okay, those values, whether you get them from church, whether you get them from your parents or your extended family, whether you get them from your gang, your set, your tribe, your group, those are invaluable because they create a structure, a basis for how you live the rest of your life. Two things on that. One, we both know, I can't remember if it was second, third time, whatever, in Afghanistan, it was an Australian general that came out, and he had those little PSAs, the public service announcements, and like the DFACs and stuff. And one was the behavior you walk by is the behavior you accept. Remember? And dude, and General, wherever you are, come up for air and tell us what that exact quote was. But that's damn close enough that if you don't create a consequence or call somebody on it, then you accept the behavior. And what do you think they're going to do next time, Brian? You said it. Your mom's going to keep yelling. Yeah, Brian, Gertrude Marin, you bastard.
Gertrude.
It just came up.
Named after
as a matter of fact, what I just wrote down there is marinate. I thought that was said, I'll let something marinate.
Yeah.
But no,
I've never heard that before, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I came up with that one too. So the idea about the Australian general, I want to add one more to that, based on exactly your idea of how we learn things. We're in a casino in a place, and we lost a load of money. Shelley didn't. I did, because I am the village idiot thinking I can outthink the slot machine, right? And so, hey, if I lost 25 cents, I'm going to bet $1. So Greg's math skills are legendary. And so I'm stinging from losing a couple $100. So I link up with Shelley with the Galifianakis, Mrs. Galifianakis. There's a message for you, which means I'm broke. Meet me at the car, right?
Yeah.
And so as we're walking out of the casino to the parking garage, and Shelley's the best human behavior profile in the world, and she's very alert. She stops, and I see her, and all of a sudden she gets the mission focus, and she walks over and she picks up a wedding ring. And Marin, I got to tell you, this was a rock. This son of a gun had more carats than Bugs Bunny, right? And so she immediately shows it to me, and you know me, so I go through the panacea. I go through the
how many
wheel
options?
of emotions. You know what I'm saying? And I'm thinking, woohoo! And Shelly immediately goes over to security, to the security desk, because she obviously checked out the place beforehand, and says, I found this by this machine. Gives the machine number and everything else. Here's my ID card. If you need to contact me or make a police report or something like that, have a good day. And there was no margin for error. Now, I know Shelly, where she grew up. I've known Shelly for 35 years, and I've seen her in all situations. Her moral compass, her turpitude never needs an adjustment.
Right.
But some people like me, I do need an adjustment once in a while, and that's why there's consequences. You said you needed an adjustment.
Right.
Whether it was you or your wife that strayed and led to something that occurred in Vegas, STD. But the idea is that whatever that was at that time, herpes, whatever that was at that time, you have to take a look at your life. How did your life turn out from that? Take a look at what you've done. I mean, we've all done bad things. Is there a way back? I guess that would be a thing from the boundaries.
That was a reference to my first marriage that we got married in Vegas, but that didn't obviously work out for a number of reasons. But that's when I realized, no, what happens in Vegas does not stay there.
Right.
It doesn't stay there at all.
And it follows you the rest of your life.
It does. So on this, all right. So we kind of talked about boundaries and this is then understanding what we just talked about. This is then how I interact in my world, in my environment. So you gave the example from one side of the coin of Shelly. Well, Shelly obviously has those. She has her boundaries. She's been taught, you can tell by those actions. So what does it look like then if I'm someone who I'm a boundary violator, right? Or I don't have the same boundaries that the rest of society does, or normal behavior. And again, that normal is just what's generally accepted.
Great question. But I think what you're asking there, and I want to make sure that this is what I'm asking. We all encounter unique little snowflakes every day. Okay.
Yeah.
A unique little snowflake, the person that wants their say and not necessarily their way, or a person that has a mode of dress or adorning themselves or acting in public that you might not agree with, doesn't mean that person's immoral, illegal, or unethical.
Right.
What the difference is where you have a clear violation of a societal or a personal boundary, and it's a repeat. Okay. And some can be so bad they don't need to repeat. You get what I'm trying to say? But there's very little in your life that you can't undo. There's very few times that you can't unring that bell. So for somebody watching, if you're feeling like you're being taken advantage of, you need to get out of the relationship, go get help, get support, get a cop. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Flee. If you think that you're not being listened to and your self-esteem is rock bottom and you feel as though you're going to hurt yourself or kill yourself, you got to go get help. Don't wait. Let this be the catalyst to do that. But if you observe, or you are the person that's always on the fringe, and you've got this flexible sense of right and wrong, and you decide that, hey, listen, the other day, the Queen Shelly again, we're coming out of City Market, and I've never seen her do this in her entire life, but we had another place to go. So you know how, like, when you're doing your cards and stuff, I don't do anything. I don't even know if we have a bank account. I'm assuming we do, or a credit card. I don't get to carry any of that stuff.
I've been witness to this
before. This is true.
I know.
But dude handed Shelly some money. It was 6 a.m. City Market in little beautiful Gunnison, Colorado. And Shelly stopped again, and I see this look, and I know something's coming. And she turns around, and she walks back and hands the guy a 10. And she said, he gave me too much money. Okay? If you're the person that said, hey, tie goes to the runner, bad luck for him, okay, you may be either approaching that baseline for aberrant or abnormal behavior or deviant behavior, and you got to rein it in. And you're saying, well, who hurts? If a person doesn't know, if I don't stop for the stop sign, those platitudes are there to make you sleep at night. If you're having those questions and you're having a problem with right and wrong, good and evil, I'll give you a copper example. So we're on a B&E, breaking and entering. And I came over because the guy was doing these floor safes, like at the pizza joints, the
Yeah,
in Detroit is Little Caesars or Howie's, Hungry Howie's and stuff, whatever the pizza joint is by you. Usually they'll have a floor safe behind the counter. That's where they drop the money, so the next shift has enough money to start up.
This is why the gangbangers are listening, by the way.
Yes, because they want to learn how to defeat it. Exactly. So if you turn it 3 clicks to the left. Now, but the idea is this crew was going up on the roof or going into the place next door. I won't tell you how they were defeating the alarm, but a copper listening right now is going, I know that move. And they were taking out the floor safes, which is a hard-ass thing to do. There was a lot of money in it.
Right.
So as we were in there, this copper walks by, and this copper is eating the pizza cheese, and he's got a pocket full of like the chiclets, those little things
bites,
that they
little garlic bite things.
Yeah, you get what I'm trying to say? And he's eating that stuff, and I look at him and I go, hey, what are you up to? And he goes, just eating, waiting for the owner. I go, are you going to pay for that stuff when he gets there? He goes, they're going to throw this stuff away. It's closed. No, that's not what I asked you. I asked you, do you intend to pay? If you've ever walked in a place and you got an extra stick of gum or a pack of smokes or anything else, and you walked out without paying, you were wrong. And you still have a chance to redeem yourself. And you're saying that's petty. Listen, if you're going to look past a pack of smokes, you'll look past a briefcase holding an iPad, or you'll look past money, or you'll look the other way when somebody's doing human trafficking. You're saying you won't, but I'll tell you, once you get on that slippery slope, it's virtually impossible to regain your footing.
And that's I think the slippery slope part is a good that's another one of those sayings, like, hey, if you go a little bit, once you get a little bit, well, now, especially if I've gotten you to come along with me and go along with something that I have going on, and you're going to look the other way, well, now I know, hey man, like, I can do whatever I want in front of you. And the other part is now I know you're now kind of complicit in whatever I do. If you're looking the other way, you know about it.
Precisely. And if you knew about it and you choose to do it anyway, people will say, hey, listen, why did I use a white lie? Well, I used a white lie because I didn't want the consequences. I didn't want to get caught in that situation. Well, what's the difference between a homicide? Do you get what I'm trying to say? Now, I'm not saying that, hey, you look really nice in that shirt today, Brian.
Yes.
I'm not talking about something that there's no intent behind it. And again, it's just a platitude. It's just some colloquial expression that people do. But I'm talking about looking the other way, or saying, we had a copper that said, hey, listen, I'm cheating on my old lady. He came from a department in Texas, went to another department. I'm not going to say which department or where, but he comes up to me. And at that time, Shelly and I were doing some IG and internal affairs stuff. And the guy comes up to me and he says, hey, you got to tell everybody that I was on this raid with you tonight. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Man.
And he's going, because I'm cheating on my old lady. I wasn't home, and she's at the airport, and she's headed for the house, and I'm never going to make it back in time. And I'm like, look, dude, that's not me. You got the wrong guy. I'm not going to look the other way. I'm not going to say that. I'm not
similar situation where someone did hey man, like, hey, if anyone asks, or if my girl asks, I was here, and before they could get because I already knew where it was going, before they could get the words out of my mouth, I go, absolutely not. I go, whatever you're doing is your business. I get it. All right. Don't make it mine. Because the second you make it mine, now I'm involved. And it was just, it was very clear. Like, I will not lie for you.
I am not wearing pants right now, which you well know. Yeah. So I would love to stand up and show you my skin knees. I don't want any of the viewers, I don't want any of the listeners thinking we're some holier than thou people.
No,
I make mistakes. I make mistakes every day of my life. But in the accounting, in the reckoning, I will stand up and say, mea culpa, I did that. Or I will try to be better the next time. The difference between the sociopath, the difference between the Machiavellian, the difference between the narcissist or a bad psychopathy is they won't. And as a matter of fact, they'll write that down and say, what an advantage I gained. I'm going to repeat that behavior. And that's where HBP are.
Right. And
that's where it comes from.
And that's a good point, because you have to mention, the white lie, hey, babe, does it look like I gained weight? The only answer to that question for me is going to be no. So
wait a minute. Live with Shelly, because Shelly will walk by me and go, fatty, fat. Okay. As she's bringing, like last night, it was salad night. And you know how much I love salad night. You get what I'm trying to say? No, she's not mean. She doesn't have a mean bone in her body. But I made the mistake of asking the question, do these pants make you look fat? And she'll answer, no, the extra 120 pounds you gained Mary is what makes you look fat, you bastard. So truthful, right?
Yeah, she's the brutal honesty always works.
Honesty.
So
that's why I married her. She reminds me of my father.
Yeah, of course, of course. She's
The,
probably
the
tougher than your
boots.
father
Oh
too,
yeah, the
honestly.
boots of truth and justice is what she wears every day.
So you brought up and you tied it back to intent, right? So
Yep.
this is where this comes into a lot of the behavior, what we're talking about, and determining a most likely, most dangerous course of action, right? We always say you got to take it into context and look at what the intent is here. So you brought up like some people are just, we've all seen the guy talking real loud on a cell phone when you're inside the train car or inside the airplane or whatever, some inappropriate situation. Right. That doesn't mean they're, once again, doing anything
a serial
illegal,
killer,
immoral.
a bad guy, or yeah, exactly.
I mean, they're just a jackass. Yeah, exactly. They're just being an ass, and that's it. And a lot of times we've all been that ass before, maybe, and not realized it, and gone, oh crap, like I'm really bothering everyone around me.
And you might be going too far to step up and say something. It's different on a plane where it might violate your safety than it is in society where it's just annoying. You get what I'm trying to say? You got to be careful because you can get punched in the nose. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
For saying something inappropriate. Now, Brian, let's put it the other end of the spectrum, because you set up white lie, and that example you did was like a quarter. Yeah. Let's say, and then here's halfway. Let's go over here for a second and balance that with Bianchi and Bono, the two guys that were the Hillside Stranglers.
Hillside Stranglers, right.
They didn't know what they wanted, okay? But they know they wanted sex, and they knew that they didn't want to get caught because they had been caught early on. So what they wanted to do, meaning identified and almost apprehended. So what they said is, we've learned something from this near apprehension, and their first people that they started picking to disenfranchise, rape, and kill were prostitutes. So then the prostitutes started catching on, going, hey, you guys aren't cops, which was unacceptable, because then the next stage is fighting back or turning in, which they didn't want. So first I learned my boundaries. My boundaries are, I want to murder, death, kill. I want to rape. I want to do this, but I don't want to get caught, right? So then I test my boundaries. I go out, we flip a fake badge or a wallet, or just act a certain manner, and the prostitutes got in the car, hey, we're arrested. Well, then after a while, that ended. So what happened is, then I have to push my boundaries. I still want to get my rocks off. I still want to do the rapes and the murders. But now this crew, set, tribe, gang that I was choosing from won't allow me in anymore. So now what I got to do is bounce around. So if you want to decide what the next thing that's going to happen in an explanatory storyline, you need to know where that continuum is. Are the people learning their behavior? Mm-hmm. Are they testing it, or are they pushing it? So Bianchi and Bono were testing it when they went and got a little girl out of a suburb. They were testing it when they did brutal sexual murder mutilations. Do you get what I'm trying to say? They were trying to find what their boundaries were. What do we like? And the coppers missed that. So let's jump fast forward, because you know the ending of that story. And if you don't do your damn homework, let's talk about what's the guy? I'm going to Disneyland. The Pentagram.
Wait, going to hang on.
Yeah, Disneyland. You know who I'm talking about. He's the
Zodiac one you're talking about?
No. The other kid, the kid that got caught from the bus stop, Richard Ramirez.
Oh, Richard Ramirez, yeah.
Yeah, the Night Stalker. So apologize about that. That's how you folks that are watching know that this is live. We don't have any kind of magic people yelling to us in the stands here. But Ramirez, right? Everybody goes to Ramirez. They said, oh, this was the catalyst that pushed his investigation. Okay, Ramirez liked getting high, okay? Ramirez liked breaking into places so he could get high again. He learned that if he has a stolen car and he gets caught in a stolen car, he goes to the stir, and he didn't like going to jail. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Didn't like that, so he avoided that. So that's part of his boundary on the other side of the coin. But guess what? He also found out that people identified him. So what did he start doing? He had a captive audience in the house. He knew he was going to kill him anyway, and he was high, and sometimes he had sex with the people. You got to understand, don't write what's not there. Don't put that round peg in a square hole. Don't rush to an unreasonable conclusion. The idea is, this is yet another lens that I can put in. I can use this as spec. I can use this as advanced critical thinking. I can use this to look in the mirror, like you're always telling people, to decide, how am I projecting?
Well, that's a good point, I think, to bring in a couple things. One, I mean, you talk about, so remember too, everyone out there, unless you're a people like to make opinions on, oh, this guy's a psychopath or this guy's a narcissist or this, and it's like, oh, okay, unless you are like, and my first question to them is, are you a clinical psychologist that's evaluated that person? Well, no. Oh, okay. So let's not jump to conclusions, because a lot of people say, oh, this guy's a psychopath, where they may just lack empathy or whatever. I mean, there's you guys can do the research.
Be a slob.
Yeah,
you get what I'm trying to say?
Exactly. But
be an introvert, right?
But
right.
what a good way to start, which I always say with this skill set with the HBPRNA, is not just, hey, this isn't about reading other people. You got to start with yourself, and that's why I always teach anytime when we go into the about kinesics and body language and all that stuff. It's like you start becoming aware, look at yourself in the mirror of your body language, your kinesics, what you're putting out there. That's one, it's going to get you better at reading other people, but it's also going to get you to understand your impact on your environment. So that brings me back to, which I know the one you love, my Taylor Swift analogy.
I love it. Absolutely.
My Taylor Swift one is and for listeners out there who are T Swift fans, huge fan of her. She's an amazing artist. She's actually writes a lot of her own music and has her whole life. So she's like a legitimate artist. She's not just one of these, kind of pop stars that they put stuff in front of her. But anyway, you look at her pattern of behavior. She has a high profile relationship, gets into a breakup, writes a song about how that guy's an ass, and that song makes a ton of money, right?
Yep.
Happens again, makes a ton of money. Then it's, oh, this girl is talking crap about me, writes a poor, sympathetic song about it, and then makes a ton of money. Okay, so that's the pattern of behavior we're seeing here, right? So every time this happens, she's rewarded with huge hits, right? So the whole point of it is I call a lot of people Taylor Swift fans, because the whole thing is she's probably never going to write a song called Maybe I'm the Problem. Right. And that's
so true.
That's with a lot of people. And I've had to learn that too. And the reason why I get to say this is because, trust me, there's been, like you talk about, skin knees, skin elbows, skin face, skin ego, skin everything. I've continued to learn. I'm in my mid 30s now, and it's continued every process, even with my wife, McKaylee. We'll start talking about stuff, and you know how we are. It's like when we teach and I'm emotional and we get going, and I'm not angry or anything, but she's got like, you got to stop with this. You get this Chicago attitude, and the next thing I know, you're coming in boom, 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 and I'm like, well, babe, I'm just talking. She's like, no, I know that's.
Plus,
what
you have to deal with my abuse.
She's
like, what I'm trying to say.
Well, that's the thing. Is like, she's like, that's what you're thinking, but this is what's going out there. So this is a constant. This is personal development. Like this is constant throughout your life, or it should be.
Absolutely, it has to be.
So it's that skinning that knees and understanding, but that's her then setting up that boundary. Like, look, you will not talk to me with that tone of voice, where I'm not upset at all. I just have to reel it back in and go, all right, this is what's going on.
So Maren, what you just described in a very, I want to tie your laser focused message to a broader sense. Remember earlier where we said Code of Hammurabi, name all the different codes. Okay. We could go down and we could talk about the Bushido code in Japan. We could talk about any place in the
Warriors
world.
Code. There's all the,
a legal basis in none of them is homicide, killing another person, legal in none of them. Okay.
Right.
And then somebody's going to call me later and go, you lying bastard, Cannibal Village, outside of, the Mazatlan or whatever. Yeah. Okay. But when it comes to that, they weren't killing a person for a homicide. They were killing a person for nutrition, eat the brain of the enemy, all that other stuff. What I'm trying to say is there's certain life rules. You don't molest your children. You take care of them. You don't kill your neighbor or rape your neighbor. You cherish the fact that they're going to watch your house when you're out. Just like we said a couple of broadcasts back about, have you ever written a manifesto? Okay. If you see yourself looking at your neighbor and going, damn, I would look good in that house, I think I'll murder them. Houston, it's you. You get what I'm trying to say? You're the problem. And I know that we're trying to make light of that just to make it more interesting, but that's seriously what this is, Brian. If you're a parent, expect your kids to learn their boundaries. Also, they're going to test them. That's why you have to have consequences built in up front, and don't hide the flipping consequences. Tell the other human, listen, I fully expect you to be a legal, moral, and ethical human. I fully expect you not to rape me on this date. I fully expect that you're going to take care of my car and bring it back fueled up, or pay if you go to a restaurant and you're drinking and then the other person doesn't drink and you're going to split up the check. You ever been in that thing with Aaron? You get what I'm saying? Brown Hotel. And all of a sudden you're sitting there saying, how did we get into triple digits?
Okay.
But the idea is,
first of all, I picked up a tab at the Brown Hotel.
Yes, you did. But thank you. Take your responsibility for your actions. And the idea is, by following codes that already exist, familial codes, societal codes, cultural codes, whatever else, that makes it easier. Second of all, if you want a guide, there's many people that you can look at in your life or through history, books or movies or self-help stuff, or the local chaplain, priest, politician. I don't know. Right now, everybody's going, cringing when I say that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. Look, if you don't have a dad, ask somebody else's dad. If you need a code to live by, there's plenty of good ones that are out there. But they'll all follow these same basic tenets, these same basic rules. Code of Bushido is no different than Lao Tzu. Do you get what I'm trying to say? When we're talking about Lao Tzu, it's no different than the Tao of Pu or the Te of Piglet.
Right.
All great writers follow those things and say, this is a Gichin Funakoshi, my way of life, Karate Do. All those things have a code, an ethical code, and when you breach them. So it's easy to follow.
It could be old Disney movies or newer ones. It's all
precisely
the same. It's the same storyline. Those are basically,
T.S. Eliot. I mean, you can go right down each one of the type of Tolkien novels, right?
The themes that have been around, whether it's theological or philosophical or cultural. It's all the same themes, those same stories.
But there's a reason they're there,
right?
Absolutely,
there's a reason they're there, because it governs human behavior. Humans have known about human behavior for a long time, and what people are going to do, and the best way to make your way in the world. It's all been. It's why I love. I think it's funny when all these different books come out about this self-help or how to realize this. And I'm just like, I learned this. I read one paragraph and I'm like, well, I was taught this I had to go to Catholic school in the South Side of Chicago for 12 years. Like, I learned all these themes already. Like, this is
there was
no
beating
different
in there if you did.
Well, there was a whole lot of other things in there. That was we don't have a long enough podcast to go into those
to discuss
issues.
Waterboarding at the Catholic school.
Exactly. But those have all been there. And so that being said, if those have all been there and how to live the good life and how to model, then all the criminal behavior has already been there and has happened before in the past.
Nothing new in the world.
There is nothing new.
Yep.
That's the thing. So it might be a new method, right? They may have a new method in which they kill you, whether that's like a newer gun or bomb that wasn't around 50 years ago, but that gun or bomb was there 50 years ago. It's just a different type. It's so the behavior, which is why I think people get confused sometimes why we don't go into some of the details about that stuff. Well, you get the guys writing about stuff. Well, he used a, Mannlicher Carcano rifle with the caliber. Like, look, dude, it was a gun.
Needless detail.
It's a needless detail that gets in the way. So that being said, I guess for what does that mean for using human behavior, pattern recognition analysis, and how to, I hate using the term, we don't use it, the profile a person or an event or a situation, and what do I need to look for if it's, this guy's a boundary violator or this guy's
So we talked about boundary violations and what those guys will look like. I think one of the things is you've got to decide how to model your behavior and how to fix the behavior of the others. And what I mean by that is, like, as a field training officer, training coppers on the road, if you had the question or saw a behavior that was questionable, I would always ask that person, okay, what if your mom was here? What would your dad say about what you just did or said to them? Or if you were meeting my mom, how would you expect her to be treated? So much so that's been around for so long. It's not me that invented that. You know that there's a commercial now on television about the mother standard of care. How would you want your mom treated when she went in for a cancer assessment or whatever? The idea is, if we all know that that's the behavior, then you need to carve out your boundaries, because boundaries are about you when you're an adult and about how your family model is when you're a kid. And that's when they can go dangerously wrong. But as an adult, if you have boundaries that define your self-worth, define your self-esteem, you have to decide when it's time to fish or cut bait. If you're dealing with a group at work, or you're dealing with a group at home, or you're dealing with a spouse or a significant other, and those persons don't think that your boundaries are worth respecting, then you either are going to lose your self-respect and be miserable and cry yourself to sleep on your immense pillow, or you're going to have to fight with that person every day of your life to bring them. You see what I'm talking about? This discourse. So you have to make the decision. You personally have to make the decision. I'm staying in this behavior. I'm modifying this behavior. I'm reporting this behavior, or I'm walking. And you know what? Sometimes voting with your feet is okay in that situation.
And that goes right back into, if the title of today's podcast is boundaries, it would be then people teach you how they want to be treated, right? Because what you're talking about is then that person, that individual in the situation you describe, is you're teaching others how you want to be treated, which goes directly into what people call target hardening, right? Not being not being a victim of a crime. It's simply you're teaching the world how you want to be treated. So if you're walking around staring at your phone and you're not situationally aware, with another term which gets overused, but if you're not looking around and you look like a victim, you're going to get treated like a victim. If you look like an opponent, that criminal is going to take one look and go, nope, I'll find someone else. So you may not, you're not going to get rid of crime. But
what's a driver do, Brian? What's a driver do?
Drivers drive.
Driver drives. And that way, if I've got my face down and I'm on the cell phone looking at directions and you're driving, that means we got to have a third guy in the back seat for the Anakin-Afghanistan. That guy's looking for that's Collier. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Looking like a bulldog staring out the window to make sure that nobody's creeping up on us. And if you can't handle those things on your own, then you don't get into that situation. You will become a victim if you're overwhelmed by events. And that's where you disregard those boundaries. You don't acquiesce that they actually exist, and you cross into the wrong landscape baseline situation without knowing it. And that's where situation awareness comes from. Situation awareness is that you predict likely eventualities, and you say, these probably won't kill me, so I'm going to do them. These are likely to kill me, so I'm going to avoid them. That's the simplest way of looking at it.
No, and that's why I kind of wanted to bring that book and tie that back in together, or tie that back into that target hardening. And exactly what we're talking about is, don't be a contributing factor to your own homicide or to your own crime.
Okay, so throw one more on there, Brian. If you let your car run to warm it up in the morning, could that car become stolen? Yeah, but that's the least of our worries. A stolen car is a property crime. What if the guy goes out and uses that in a homicide? You get what I'm trying to say? Or uses that in a robbery or burglary or kidnapping or something else like that? Think of those things. So you've got to spiral out from just the baseline to the ML COA, then explanatory storylines. And if any of those intersect in this 360 with the MD COA, and you were the cause of it, how are you going to feel the rest of your life? So you got to nip that in the bud, Barney Fife. You got to go backwards and say, how does this fall into this baseline? Where does my behavior and my understanding of boundaries affect you? And if the person that you're with isn't exhibiting it, 911 or get help or get out of the situation. And if, let's say you're in a school and you see that behavior and it manifests itself in a specific way, let's say bullying, or let's say a classic Shelly walking up to DB with me in a situation, and this young girl had gained weight since we had last seen her. She was wearing nothing but sweatpants and sweatshirt, and her clothing was filthy, and she was filthy. And Shelly looked at me before we even walked up and said, she's being sexually abused. And Shelly walks up, and we said, hey, how's school? And she goes, man, I love school. It's amazing. I can't get enough of school. And Shelly looked at me and said, she's being abused at home. All of that from the profile that was given, and now that gives us a baseline with which to investigate. You don't draw conclusions that quickly. What you do, if you've been around long enough, I'm trying to say, that those artifacts and evidence start to form a reasonable conclusion, and now it allows you a place to start. So flip-flop that and say, now we're not looking for sexual abuse. Now we're working at a kiosk selling airplane tickets, right? And now I want to turn that into customer satisfaction. Everything is right here, Brian. Human behavior teaches us how to treat other people and emotionally manipulate them for the better, okay? And guess what? To find a bad guy, look at somebody that's emotionally abusive or emotionally manipulative,
right?
Negative results, right?
Yeah, no, and that's where you're getting to. We always say the most likely, most dangerous course of action is that's a great way. If you observe that person who does not accept boundaries, no matter what.
Yep.
Okay, that is someone who that's going to carry over into other areas of their
Every
life,
aspect
right?
of their life, every aspect.
If they refuse to, accept basic boundaries of behavior, right? Some people, hey, it says, don't park here, or hey, they park in the handicap spot,
Right.
even though they're not like that. Yeah, that person might not be hacking up, bodies when they come home from work, but they do not accept those boundaries, and
Exactly.
so that's going to happen in other areas of their life. So don't jump to the point where they're a criminal, terrorist, insurgent, but that's
an unreasonable conclusion,
right?
But the idea is there's still somebody that you want to either keep an eye on,
Yep.
or get out of your life, or modify their behavior. How do you modify somebody else's behavior? You tell them there's consequences for your actions.
Yeah.
Ambushed at 1800 is a gosh darn chapter in my book. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And to keep that job, you had to shut up and say yes, dear, and get that ambush and work all weekend long for that project that had to be on Sunday so they could present it on Monday. And it was a control thing. That person was just being controlling to show, look, I made you dance, you marionette. And you know what? If you put up with it, which sometimes we put up with things that we don't like because we want to further our career, or we want to make more money or something, but then it's on you, isn't it? Isn't it your decision? But if you know it, can you modify it? Yes. If you can't, then you have to make a choice. I'm leaving or I'm staying. Should I stay or should I go now?
And that's I think a great point to kind of wrap everything together or tie it in on is that now it becomes, if you recognize those behaviors and accept them, you now have some responsibility for this, right? So now maybe like you just said, that's a situation where we've all seen the movie Horrible Bosses. Some of you have experienced horrible bosses, people that you've worked for that you're like, this is a horrible person, but you've accepted that because there's a greater thing here in mind, or you have some other strategy or plan in place where you go, well, I know I just have to put up with this until. But if you don't have that, now you just have to accept some of that responsibility, and then that'll get you.
And we're not talking accepting illegality.
No,
we're not saying
just
doing
poor behavior
things that are unethical. We're saying damaged humans, showing their sociopathy and their psychopathy at work. You get what I'm trying to say, and that's very different than somebody saying, "Don't say anything if I touch you in your swimsuit area." So we're not saying that at all. We're saying that's always wrong. That's always full stop. That's a great point,
which
Brian.
is one of the first things you say to me any hotel we check into. But
exactly.
anyway, but that's
they're long road trips, Brian.
So that kind of brings us to I kind of with the bathing suit comment there, I kind of forgot where we were at. But no, it was
no, you gotta listen. Don't you have to remind your kids? Don't you have to remind the people? Hey, listen, my dad used to do it all the time. He used to walk up to us and say, "You're outside where people can see you. Be somebody." And we knew what that meant. We knew that big, boots of truth and justice were coming flinging at you, or he was going to yank you if you stepped on a line. So when you tell your kid, "Hey, bathing suit area," when you're at the hotel, you're telling them, make sure you don't get out of line. Don't find yourself in that situation coming up from the pool in the elevator with a bunch of people you don't know in unfamiliar territory. That's what you're trying to say. Again, we have this gallows humor only based on the fact that we always get to see the worst side of life.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell the people out there that there's a way to fix those.
Horrible experiences, PTSD,
one after the other.
Traumatic brain injuries lead you to that. Well, this is how things are. It's a struggle every day, but that's why we have to laugh about it, because otherwise, we'd be another statistic. But that's and when you're dealing with these people and you're talking about boundaries and you think you've identified it, you try to treat it with what you can based on what the relationship is. I still have to deal with folks like this, and it's
lover,
the way
friend, coworker,
it's the way it's going to be for a
Yep.
while. And that's just, I don't have an option out of that. So I try to use that empathy to just, that hurt people, right? So people that are inside they're going to attack you, and you're the problem, and you're it. And so as long as you establish those boundaries, if it's very clear on what is and isn't acceptable behavior, you're teaching them how you want to be treated. And you do that every second of your day.
Real quick. This morning in Denver on the news, there was a female that thought she was getting shafted by the people that were working on her car. So instead of going to that person and saying, I'm going to sue or go get a lawyer or do something else, she went and reported her car stolen. One, low level of emotional maturity.
There. Yeah.
Second thing is false reporting. There's so many things wrong with that, but I won't go into that. But what I'm trying to say is the antithesis of that. What I'm trying to say is if you've identified these and if you think that you're with an offender, you got to do something about it. This would be the perfect place for one of those, if you see something, say something. If you're a student, say something to your teacher. If the teacher won't listen, say something to the principal, assistant principal, counselor, nurse, bunch of people at school. If you see it in a workplace, say something. Because, Brian, there's never a time when a person spins out at work or domestic violence occurs at work and somebody gets killed or some kid brings a gun to school. There's never a time where somebody says, we never saw it coming.
Right.
There's always a time where you can go back and put, here are the clusters that coalesced and created this damaged humans acting out.
And,
so
and yeah,
that's by identification.
I always like, we prefer the term, the low calorie intervention, right? If I can stop right here between me and you, maybe you're the person I have a problem with, Greg. Maybe we should have another talk after this call about boundaries.
That's not a Freudian slip, folks. He actually is a problem with me.
So
that's his way of saying it. I guess.
So, but that's the thing.
To the 7 people listening, thank you, Brian. We have a global reach, folks.
Well, if it's 7 people listening, all 7 of them are contacting us constantly.
If they know
because
they know me, they're all pointing at the screen and saying it's him.
So if we only have that many people, then they're a very active audience because they don't stop. But anyway,
my PTSD is so bad. I didn't know you were here for a long time.
Yeah,
I thought I was making you up.
So if you can nip it in the bud with that person, because one, that's going to directly affects your life and theirs, because I always
and your self-esteem and your quality of life. You're exactly right, Brian.
And Greg, too, this goes right back to another use of that most likely, most dangerous course of action.
Certainly.
Maybe you're treating me that way and you're not intending to. Maybe that's not your intent.
Maybe I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe I haven't learned those boundaries, so and your job is to educate me.
And I come in and I say, hey, Greg, this is what you're doing. This is how it's making me feel. This is where it's coming off. A lot of times that person's going to go, are you serious? I apologize. I had no idea. And they'll self-correct their behavior, whether they meant to or not.
Everybody would want to do that.
Most people will do that. And if it is someone with some nefarious intent or they're doing it on purpose, hey, they know they can't get away with it with you. And that's what's important. Because
that's why you establish those consequences up in front, and don't be flexible. You must be rigid when it comes to, because the minute that you accept it, let's go back to that Australian general again. What you walk by is what you accept. Let's not do that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's a good landing point for this episode. So
great talk. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for listening. We'll talk after this about some boundaries between you and I.
I apologize in advance.
So folks, if remember, guys, if you're listening along, you enjoy it, like it, share it with your friends. You can follow us on Facebook at HBPRNA. Check out some of the clips we have on the Left of Greg YouTube channel. We're going to be putting some more up there and doing some little tutorial stuff. So you guys
next week, a couple of pictures of my skinned knees. If you're
so I think that's on a different website.
What do you think? Exactly.
So all right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Don't forget, be safe out there, and training changes behavior.